In the last video, we spoke about why we use portals. So anytime that we want to kind of get an element not rendered as a direct descendant of some component, we can use a portal to instead place that component as a descendant of some other element inside of our HTML structure. The most common uses for this are to make modal windows, or anytime that we want to work with some third-party library, or use React to render some content into some third-party element or something like that. So let's try creating a new modal element. We're going to build this as a reusable component where we can show any content inside of it that we want to show. So let's get to it. I'm going to flip back over to my code editor. I'm going to close down that modal HTML file. You can delete it if you want to, but I would recommend you just keep it around as a quick example. Then inside of my components directory, I'm going to make a new file called modal.js. And then inside of here, we're going to put together a little bit of boilerplate for a functional component. So I'll say import React from React. I'll say import React DOM from React-DOM. Notice how we are importing React DOM inside of here, which we normally do not do except inside of our root component file, usually the index.js file. Then after that, I'll define my functional component. So I'll say const modal is going to receive some number of props. We're going to use that in just a little bit. And then for right now, I'll just very quickly export default modal at the bottom. All right. So now at this point, I know that you are very much used to always returning some JSX from all of our components, like so, right? We return some JSX, have some text inside of it, or reference to another element or something like that. When we create a portal, the return value of our component is going to change just a little bit. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to say React DOM.createPortal. Now this function is going to take two separate elements, or excuse me, arguments. The first argument is going to be some blob of JSX, something that we want to show on the screen. So in this case, I'm going to put in as the first argument a div with a class name of UI dimmer modals visible active, like so. Now that seems like a very specific class name. Well, the class name is coming from Semantic UI. Remember, we have Semantic UI wired up to this project, so these are all the class names that are required to get a modal, or the background to be precise, to display on the screen. Then inside that div, I'm going to place another div with the class name of UI standard modal visible active. And then finally inside of there, I'll just place a little bit of gibberish for right now. So this should get a modal to show up. Now, the only issue is that we need to make sure that this modal, or these two divs right here, are rendered directly on our body element, as opposed to being deeply nested underneath like stream delete or something like that. So in order to make sure that we attach that modal, or that those two divs appropriately to the body element, we're going to provide a second argument to create portal. So I'm going to put a comma right there. And then as the second argument, I'm going to provide a reference to the element that I want to render this portal into. Now, I know that I've been saying, oh yeah, we're going to attach it to the body, attach it to the body. Well, if we try to attach this to the body or give a direct reference to the body, then that portal is going to actually replace all the current content in the body. So instead, what we usually do when we create a portal is we will go into our index.html file and we'll create a new div with some ID. And then we'll target that div to place our render, or excuse me, our modal, excuse me, into. So I'm going to flip back over to my index.html file inside of my public directory. So this time index.html, not the modal.html file. Then inside of here, I'm going to scroll down to our div with the ID of root. And as a sibling to that, I'll place a div with an ID of modal, like so. So now we're going to provide a reference to this div right here to that create portal call. So I'm going to save the HTML file. I'll close it. I'm going to go back over to my modal.js file, and I'll provide a selector for that, or a reference to that div, by saying document.querySelector pound modal, like so. And that's pretty much it. So now anytime that we render our modal component on the screen, rather than showing up as a direct child of the parent component, it will be rendered into the div with an ID of modal. Now, if this div does not exist inside of our HTML document, we're going to very quickly see an error message. So just be aware of that. Now, the last thing we have to do is attempt to actually show this component on the screen. So I'm going to open up my stream delete component. Here's stream delete. At the top, I'm going to import modal from up1 directory modal. And then I'm going to turn this into a multi-line JSX expression. Make sure you take care of that semicolon right there. And then as a sibling to stream delete right here, the plain text, I'm going to place my modal component like so. So now anytime that we show stream delete, we're going to render modal. Modal is going to take this JSX right here and attempt to insert it as a child to that div with ID of modal. So let's now save this, and we'll flip back over to our browser and see how it works. So I'm going to flip back over to my application at localhost 3000. And then we need to get that delete component to appear on the screen. As a quick reminder, we can find out the URL or the path to use to access that component if we open up our app component. So here's app right here. Here are our routing rules. So if we just go to streams/delete, we should see that component appear. So I'm going to go to localhost 3000 streams/delete. And now I see my modal appear on the screen successfully. I know it's really ugly, but it is technically working. We've got our text inside of here, we've got the gray background, and I can kind of see the elements behind it, but not quite. So the modal is definitely working as expected. Okay, so that's pretty much it. That's what we use these portal things for. Anytime we want to create a portal, we return a reference or a call to react-dom.createPortal. The first argument is going to be some JSX. The second argument is going to be a reference to a HTML element. Usually, we're going to get that reference by using document.querySelector. Now, the only time that you're going to want to create a portal is anytime that you are doing something like, say, creating a modal, obvious case, or anytime that you are trying to render some React component into some HTML that was not created by your application or by your React application, to be more specific. The most common case in which you will use something like create portal in that type of scenario is if you're trying to introduce React into a server-side rendered application, maybe like a Java application that renders HTML on the back end, or maybe a Ruby on Rails application or Django or something like that. Okay, so now that we've got our modal component put together, let's take a quick pause right here. When we come back to the next section, we're going to start to customize this thing so that it looks a little bit better, a little bit closer to what you see right here. So quick pause, and I'll see you in just a minute.